People have said that Tchaikovsky is a great ballet composer and kind of poo-pooed his symphonies. I just can't see that. I think they're fantastic. Everything that this man set his hand to do is touched with genius. And the symphonies, yeah, if you're going to compare them to Beethoven, they're not just structurally sound. They're glued together in some places. Fine. They're still fantastic pieces. So Tchaikovsky will be remembered for every one of his great pieces, whether it's a ballet score or concerto or opera or ballet.
Tchaikovsky is one of the most interesting and enigmatic figures. His music is immensely popular, and it seems to all of its audiences as if it's about emotion. It's about intense emotion. Romeo and Juliet, Swan Lake, Nutcracker, Pathétique. It's so externally present. Every sort of intensity of feeling, pathetic feeling, depression, exaltation, happiness, desire, frustration. It is an extremely frenzied, intense, emotionally present form of music.
Tsar was a fan of ballet, and of course he wanted Tchaikovsky to write for his ballet and supported and sponsored these things. But interestingly enough, Tchaikovsky became famous in America because of his ballets, because of Balanchine and all these great Russian choreographers. They came to America, and of course they picked Tchaikovsky's music and these great ballets immediately.
But those ballets are so beloved, and the music is more responsible even than the choreography for their success, that some people don't realize there's a huge body of additional Tchaikovsky. But I don't think by any means the ballets overshadow the symphonies, at least not the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth symphonies. They don't overshadow the B-flat minor piano concerto. There are many Tchaikovsky hits. If you have one of those anthology of masterpieces that the record companies churn out with some regularity, you'll find a lot of Tchaikovsky in it, and it's not just ballet.
Tchaikovsky was born on May 7, 1840, in an industrial town in the Ural Mountains of European Russia. He studied piano as a child, but really didn't display any great talent. At the age of 8, he and his family moved to St. Petersburg. When the young Pyotr turned 12, his parents sent him to the School of Jurisprudence. During this time, his beloved mother died, and Tchaikovsky was devastated. At 19, he graduated and became a law clerk in the Ministry of Justice. It appeared he was destined to be one of the thousands of lowly civil servants shunned by ordinary Russians.
He came from a modest gentry, but he was sent, for example, to the school for the civil service of the Russian czars, in the School of Jurisprudence in St. Petersburg, and he grew up with all of the futures of intellectual civil servants and aristocrats of the reigning monarchy. So he was, in that sense, privileged, although poor. For an aristocrat, he was relatively poor. He was always in debt, for example, and later in life he needed patronage.
He represented the European culture in St. Petersburg, and the tension between the Europeans and the nationalists was exactly the tension between these two cultures in Russia. So he represented something that the Tsar family wanted St. Petersburg to be. They wanted it to be a European capital with a lot of communication and connection to the European culture and, of course, European music. And Tchaikovsky wanted to follow that idea. And that was quite unsexy at the time when the nationalists wanted to bring the real Russian culture into St. Petersburg.
Tchaikovsky, during his lifetime, was extremely popular in Russia and abroad. His greatest gift was his ability to write flowing, infectious melodies.
There's an awful lot of non-intervallic music. Da, 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 da. We have many tunes of Tchaikovsky that have scales in them, and therefore they're easier to remember. Yeah, with that in mind. So I think it's one of the sort of musicological compositional tricks that Tchaikovsky uses. Makes the music unfold just most naturally, just like on a simple scale.
There were very beautiful things happening at the time. Strauss was around. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was going on. These were beautiful, wonderful things. So he wrote according to what he had. Again, what he acquired. Again, it's very cleverly done, very Mozartian, because if you look at the Fourth Symphony, it's basically a chromatic scale. So it's a chromatic scale, which adds, instead of 8, you have 16 notes. So he took the 16 and juxtaposed them as a tune. Mozart did that all the time. He was the greatest when it came to chromatic scales. He'll take 4 notes and it's like a different country. This is the same melody. It's nice. It's a nice, beautiful melody.
Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky was yet another one of music's great composers whose relatively short life consisted mostly of emotional turmoil and suffering. He once wrote, "The notion that one day people will try to probe into the private world of my thoughts and feelings, into everything that I have so carefully hidden throughout my life, is very sad and unpleasant."
Nowadays, biographers are fond of talking about the theme of homosexuality in Tchaikovsky. Of course, he lived at a time when that was not only not fashionable, it was criminal. And so he had to lead a kind of double life. And I think that created tensions within him as well. And sometimes it's argued that that in fact led to his ultimate suicide. Was it a suicide? All we know for sure was that he died of cholera because he drank water that hadn't been boiled. Now, did he drink the water deliberately, or was it an act of suicide, or was it a mistake? That's the question that I would like to ask Tchaikovsky if I ever had the chance to meet him. Did he really finally reach the stage where he couldn't go on any longer?
The reality was that he was, from his early school days, someone who understood that his real sexual desires were toward men. As a result, he lived a kind of closet life. He had a disastrous, very brief episode in marriage in order to appear respectable. And he had through his life the search for a satisfying human relationship which never actually occurred. He was utterly alone.
During this darkest of dark periods, Tchaikovsky wrote his most successful opera, Eugene Onegin, and his most mature symphony to date, the Fourth, which he dedicated to his benefactor, Madame von Meck.
The luckiest thing that probably ever happened to him was called Madame von Meck, the widow who corresponded with him but didn't want to meet. And so they had this extraordinary correspondence, some of the letters of which included cash. And so she helped him through some difficult times of insecurity. He wrote to his brother constantly, and the letters of Tchaikovsky are one of the most remarkably revelatory series of documents we have in music, that somebody with so much talent, so much genius, one might argue, was filled with so much doubt about his own ability. And you find that very much in the music. There is a kind of yearning melancholy at the root of Tchaikovsky's music that seems to come from his own life experience. And no triumph seemed to last forever for him. It was only the prelude to the next period of depression. And as a result, it's a very characteristic music. You would never confuse Tchaikovsky with Beethoven. Beethoven knew there was going to be a sunny tomorrow. Tchaikovsky knew there wasn't.
Fate, to Tchaikovsky, was an inescapable fatal force that shattered any dreams of hope or happiness. Tchaikovsky's fate is what the Fourth Symphony is all about. He wrote how he felt, which was often deeply depressed.
The Fourth Symphony has a lot of optimism. It has kind of a logical Beethoven type of drama going from anxiety, desperation to victorious finale. And I think that symphony certainly has a solution.
The movement that seems to stay with us is the pizzicato movement. In fact, many orchestras use that as an encore, just to show that their enormous string section can play together with this kind of infection. It comes as an enormous surprise when it suddenly hits us, and then that the orchestra can sustain it brilliantly. It always gets an ovation. In fact, that's part of the problem with some of Tchaikovsky's symphonies, that people want to applaud before it's over because it's been such a terrific effect that he's pulled off. The Toronto Symphony was on tour in Europe several years ago with the Polish guest conductor Kazimierz Kord, and the big piece in the tour was the Fourth Symphony. And I noticed, I was traveling along with them, that each concert, the tempi got a little faster in the third leading to the fourth movement. And I asked him, "Maestro, what are you trying to do?" And he said, "I'll get it as fast as Mravinsky and the Leningrad Philharmonic did it yet." And I think what he was after was this sense of triumph at the end, which is not the most characteristic Tchaikovskyan emotion. But he felt that in the Fourth Symphony, he could do it through tempi, and he probably could. It's, with all the brass reinforcement, it's one of the brightest sounding, despite its moments of gloom, of the Tchaikovsky symphonies. And this particular conductor thought that he was going to use it as Tchaikovsky's Beethoven statement.
Traditionally, most symphonies start with a sense of dignity and build to a boisterous, triumphant climax. And this is especially true for most of Tchaikovsky's symphonies. But uncharacteristically, Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony, the last symphony he composed before his suspicious death, ends in a chilling whimper.
It's kind of a farewell to life, and maybe some passions together with a great deal of disappointment. I think that's the mood of the work, and you really feel that he's literally going away at the end of the last movement, and those last steps are there, and we can feel them.
You clearly get the message in the Pathétique Symphony, say, of Tchaikovsky, that all is not well here. There's tremendous tragedy and despair and hopelessness, and that he's really felt, and it comes across, and we feel it in ourselves. You know, when you like a piece of music, you're saying, yes, I felt that way too.
Tchaikovsky's death in 1893 at the age of 53 is as tragic as the man himself. Russian biographers claim he died from drinking unboiled water during a cholera epidemic. But recent evidence has brought to light that Tchaikovsky was tried for his sexual behavior by a court of honor made up of his old classmates. They sentenced him to death, and he committed suicide. Whichever way he died, one thing is certain: music had lost another great genius far too early.